the American League Championship. I don't believe it. It just continues. My, oh, my.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
Oh, drives one. Right field. Did he do it? He did. Are you kidding me? Let's go.
Hey, more baseball is on the way. This is like Christmas this time of year. College baseball regionals get underway, Friday? The Dominican Summer League gets going Monday. The complex leagues both get going on Tuesday. It must be June. It must be June. This is the FSS Plus podcast. I'm Jason Churchill. With me is Joe Doyle. Joe, it doesn't get much better than this if you are a fan of the game of baseball, does it? I mean, June just brings a little bit or a lot of everything.
Everything. I love this time of year, man. We're walking up on the draft. High school baseball is coming to a close. The College World Series is here. I mean, the All-Star game, the Futures game, All-American games. Like, this is when it starts to heat up, man. If you're into the whole like life cycle of a player from 16 to 36, this is the sweet spot. And the weather's great.
It really is in most parts of the country too. We're up here in the Northwest where you kind of have to wait till late May or June to get the good weather, and other parts of the country get a little sooner. But just about everywhere, you have an opportunity to have 70, 75, 80, 85 degrees and sunny, and man, that's baseball weather. By the way, Friday's Arizona TCU matchup, I think that's the Fayetteville Regional. That one's going to have my eyeballs on Friday night. 2 first-round talents in that game, in Chase Davis and Braden Taylor, so that's always fun. And there are matchups like that all over the place the next 3 weeks in college baseball. You're going to be able to see pitcher-hitter matchups of like first, second, third-round picks facing each other. That's going to happen left and right. That's one of the funnest things about May and June in amateur baseball. All right, here's today's agenda. We're going to talk a little draft. If we have Joe with us, we're probably talking draft. Today, I want to get Joe's take on biggest and best upside plays in the draft class, and I want to leave out, Joe, players that don't currently project as first round guys. So maybe we're kind of removing the top 30 to 40 guys from the conversation. So I want to get some names from you that fit that category, the upside category. And I also want to talk about the American League East and how unique that situation is. It's pretty crazy right now in that division. And if it stays that way or even anywhere close, there are going to be ramifications. And that might impact how some teams handle things over the summer. And you know what? Why don't we just start right there? We'll get to the draft in a little bit. The American League East and Major League Baseball in 2023, Joe, all 5 teams have a winning record entering play on Thursday. There are 6.5 games separating the last place team with the second place team, which is Baltimore. And Baltimore's 14 games over 500. 3 teams are 10 or more games over 500. The Rays, the Orioles, and the New York Yankees. Joe, it looks like right now there are 3 playoff teams in the division, does it not?
Yeah, there has to be. I mean, but even looking at the rosters, you don't look at the AL East and think, this is a fraud. This is a fraud. But I go back to this. I do still think there's going to be 3 playoff teams, but there has to be cannibalism. Now, there's not 19 games in the division like there was prior to this year. There's only 13 games. So I think that kind of takes the cannibalistic nature of the AL East down a peg. But I mean, the Blue Jays are in last place in that division, and they might have the second best roster. The Yankees look, at least from a pitching perspective, not from a health perspective, they could really pitch. That's the best Yankees bullpen that we've seen in recent memory. The Rays are hot as hell. The Orioles are a trade deadline away from being a legitimate World Series contender from this chair. So, yeah, man, like the AL East is pretty loaded, and I still don't totally believe in the Boston Red Sox, if I'm being totally honest with you. But do you see a scenario where all 3 of the wild card teams come out of the AL East? Am I wrong?
It's possible because right now, the way you look at it, you're getting 2 wildcard teams. If the season ended today, you'd have the Rays winning the division, you'd have Baltimore as the number 1 wild card, and you'd have the Yankees as the either the number 2 wild card or they'd be the number 3, and the Houston Astros would be the number 2, depending on exactly which day you look at the standings. But let's dive into the Yankees really quick here. You mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned that pitching staff, that bullpen obviously has things rolling. Can that starting rotation? I think that's the question with New York. I think there's 2 questions with the Yankees. Can the starting rotation hold up? I mean, with the injuries they have, you're looking at Garrett Cole, Nestor Cortez, Domingo Herman, Clark Schmidt, who has pretty good stuff, and he'll get swings and misses, especially with that slider. But can he hold up? And can he maybe improve a little bit? He's actually outpitched his standard general ERA a little bit if you look at some of the other runs allowed metrics. But he's not a 1 or a 2. It's really Clark Schmidt and a couple of number 3s and whatever Domingo Herman turns into, and then maybe a hole at the back of the rotation. And there doesn't appear to be a lot of depth there. So I think that starting rotation is a little bit of a question for the Yankees. They might wish they still had Jordan Montgomery at this point.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if the rotation is going to progress and regress back to the mean. Like Nestor Cortez has not been Nestor Cortez this season. I would expect him to get a little better. He was very good against
Mhm.
Seattle this week, so it's something to keep an eye on. Clark Schmidt, again, not that good, but the stuff is good. Luis Severino, if I'm the Yankees, I expect nothing from Luis Severino this year. He's been
Right.
so hurt over the last few years. I don't think that you can kind of pencil in anything. And then Carlos Rodon can say whatever he wants about his back. It's a back.
Mhm.
We don't know about a back. We've seen so many guys come back from a back injury, and then their oblique goes. Oh, then their hamstrings go. Oh, then their
Right.
abdominal core goes. Like it could be anything. So you have Garrett Cole. He's a legitimate horse. He might be the best pitcher in baseball. And then I think, like you said, you've got a whole lot of number 3s there that are kind of a hodgepodge of producing and not producing. I think the Yankees need to go out and they need to trade for a starting pitcher. I think that's kind
Mhm.
of what I'm coming around to, because the rest of the roster is good enough to win. Frankly, if we're being totally honest, to win a World Series, they've got the pieces. I do think they could use another bat. I don't think you can lean on a Willie Calhoun type of player in October. So I think they could use one more kind of leverageable stick. But yeah, there's some question marks in the rotation. A lot of injuries, which
I
is
think
the New York way.
there's been some injuries to the bullpen as well. You look at guys that are on the IL right now. They got some key, obviously, and Frankie Montas is another one with Rodon, where you can't expect
Mhm.
anything from those guys at this point. I mean, Severino looks like, okay, maybe like that's a little different story than Montas and Rodon at this point. But even that bullpen, they have a couple of key guys that are on the IL, including a couple that are on the 60-day. You just don't know if and when you're going to get them back. Lou Trevino being one of those. But I think you look at the lineup right now, and I think my concern there is, I mean, you got Harrison Bader on the IL. That doesn't necessarily look to be long term, but is there enough there? You mentioned Willie Calhoun; they're kind of counting on him right now. He was batting 3rd or 4th in the lineup over the weekend at T-Mobile Park in Seattle for that series. And while he's swinging the bat pretty well right now, you get Giancarlo Stanton and Josh Donaldson back, but can you rely on him? And I guess that's the thing. Is there enough reliability on that club? I mean, Anthony Rizzo isn't injury prone, so the fact that he was out for a few days there and missed the Seattle series, I'm not really thinking about that. Is there enough reliability and availability in that lineup to keep things rolling, to keep Aaron Judge? He's the ultimate factor, Joe. I mean, we were wowed watching that series. You can't pitch to him. He's so difficult to pitch to, and he completely changes how you attack everything in that lineup, because you do not want to face him in a situation where one swing of the bat gives you the lead or ties the game. But I just don't know if there's enough else there. I like Anthony Rizzo. He's having a good year. LeMahieu's not quite the hitter he has been in years past. I like Gleyber Torres. But is it deep enough? What are they going to get offensively from Volpe? What are they going to get offensively from the catcher spot? I just don't know if there's enough availability there with some of those other guys to ride me to 95 wins with that club. So maybe 88 to 90 gets them in. And right now they're rolling, but if that pitching falls apart, I just don't like their chances.
I think they've got enough. I say this as a person that watched the pennant race in 2022 and watched all of these veterans struggle. I mean, it was
Mhm.
Aaron Judge and junk last year, and really the roster is exactly the same. So I think, if you can get Stanton back and you can have him healthy for October, I think that's a big one. Even though there's a lot of swing and miss, I do think that's a big addition. Anthony Rizzo is going to be some form of a producing first baseman or DH. He's critical to this roster as one of the only left-handed hitters that they can throw out there. LeMahieu is seasoned. I think Donaldson is seasoned. Both of those guys are obviously on a slippery slope down towards the later stages of their careers, but I think there's enough in this roster to push their way through the American League if they can get to that point and lean on the pitching. But like I said, I really think they need a left-handed bat to kind of not only stabilize what this roster looks like right now, but also just throw another healthy stick in this organization that they can rely on in October. Because as we've seen, this organization, for some reason or another, and maybe it's because they're 33, 34, 35-year-olds, they just break down.
Yeah. So, really quick question, and then we'll move on to Baltimore really quick. If looking at that farm system in New York, do they have enough talent to go make a somewhat blockbuster deal? I have one in mind just to give you something to reply to. If the Chicago Cubs tailspin a little bit, they might consider moving some dudes. Okay, I know they're trying to win and they're actually buying, but the market might be down for starting pitching this summer. And if you make a kid like Marcus Stroman available, a good year, maybe a career year, people are going to come calling, and you might have the best starting pitcher on the market. Now, they don't have to move him. I mean, he's under club control through next season, although he can opt out after this year, and he's having a career year. So that might be one of the reasons why they consider trading Stroman, despite the fact that he's off to a pretty good start. Now, he's not a dominant one. He's probably a guy that fits in that 3 spot. But if you're the Yankees, don't you call the Cubs and say, hey, we'd really love to get Marcus Stroman. And while we're at it, while we're talking, what would it take to get Stroman and Cody Bellinger from the Chicago Cubs? Do the Yankees have the firepower in their farm system, or even if we include the 26-man roster, to go make a deal like that? Or are they going to get kind of outpaced by the Baltimores and the Texas Rangers and the Astros and teams like that have bigger and better and deeper farm systems right now?
Well, clearly they have the pieces. Trey Sweeney, Everson Pereira, Spencer Jones, like Jason Dominguez, like they have the pieces. But are the Yankees in a position to hemorrhage their farm system to the point where it's one of the bottom 5, 6, 7 farm systems in baseball for a couple of rentals? I don't know. I think it kind of depends on how you view this roster. If you view this roster as a World Series contender on July 31st, July 29th, wherever they make the deal, then maybe you make that deal. But I'm probably not moving. I'm probably not trading for both. If I'm the Yankees, I'm trying to keep all 5 of my top 5 prospects, because I do think Sweeney, Pereira, Jones, Wells, and Dominguez are guys that you want to see play out in the system. There's a lot of good arms below that, but there's a lot of reliever questions. So if it takes, if I'm just throwing names around here, if it takes Clayton Beeter and Tristan Vreeling to get Cody Bellinger, I think you probably make that deal. Stroman's going to be expensive, because a rental for the NL's best pitcher right now is going to be spendy, but that they're going to have to make a move. And I think first of all, for me, it would be a bat for New York.
You'd prioritize offense. Yeah. I could see that. I can go either way. I think they need a little bit of both, but how much impact they can get remains to be seen. Baltimore, with all their young talent, might be one of the clubs in that division best, prepped to make an impact deal. But the question is, if you're the Orioles, you have one of the top farm systems in baseball. Are you including in any conversation any of the top young talents that are at the major league level for you right now? The Grayson Rodriguez's and the Gunnar Hendersons and the Adley Rutschmans. My thought is no. So leaving those 3 out, can they go make an impact deal? Because I look at that starting rotation, Joe, and so far in the first 2 full months of the season, that's one of the bottom 5 to 8 rotations so far in production. They have a bunch of mid-level guys for the most part, and Grayson Rodriguez is still getting his feet wet.
Well, I mean, they certainly have the pieces. They have, for example, Kobe Mayo is the number 8 prospect, according to Pipeline in the Orioles organization. That he's a top 2 prospect in the Yankees organization. So they've got the ammo. They're going to need pitching. If they think this is their year, they're going to need pitching. I am reluctant to think that, knowing where the Orioles are in their rebuild, I'm reluctant to think that they would start moving pieces for rentals, unless that ownership group, which has to this point, shown no interest in spending money as they kind of figure out what the succession plan looks like over there. I
Mhm.
don't think they're in any hurry to move assets, cheap controllable assets for rentals. So I would ask your opinion. If you are the Orioles front office, is now
Mhm.
the time to make a move for a rental? Because
See, the thing
they
is,
seem to
like,
be kind of living in this. We want to push the window open, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I really think that depends on how many of those starting pitchers actually make it to market. And that was kind of the point that I was making quickly there with Stroman. Like, there's a chance he's the best starter on the market. And I realize he's not a one, he's not an ace. I get that. He's throwing the ball well, maybe having the best year of his career. Another guy over in the American League is Eduardo Rodriguez. Like, if you're Detroit, now they're trying to hang on to contention in a terrible American League Central right now. They're hovering around 500 within a game or two in either direction. But if they get to a point where they put Eduardo Rodriguez on the market and you look at his contractual situation, he's making $15 million a year, but can opt out after the season. You have to look at him as a rental. And we all know the thing with the rental is if you trade for him on July 31st, you're getting him for 2 months and maybe the postseason. So you're getting him for roughly 33% of the season, but you're going to pay as if you're getting him for 50 to 70% of the season. That's the way these things work. So if you're telling me the cost for starting pitching at the deadline is one of my top 5 to 7 prospects, and then another one in the 8 to 12 range to get 2 months of Eduardo Rodriguez or Marcus Stroman, I probably back off. I'd rather pay a little more than that. I'd rather take that 50 to 70% to 120 and get a guy that I can keep for 2 years. So I'd rather actually pay more and get more out of it than doing it. I know there are a lot of clubs right now. Seattle's in the same boat that Baltimore is. They don't really want to go the rental route because they're trying to protect this long-term window. But I still think if you're Baltimore, you have to do something. So I really don't know what the answer is there, but they're going to need rotation help. And some of it may come from some of the guys they have just being a little bit better, and Grayson Rodriguez maybe turning the corner, but they're going to have to look around and find at least a mid-rotation guy or two to fill out that rotation if they want to continue at the pace that they're at right now, because that's the thing. That's their backbone right now. And it's not looking good for that rotation. We think they're going to hit, right? We think Gunnar Henderson's going to hit.
Oh yeah.
We know he's hitting. We know they're going to score some runs, and they're trending in the right direction there. But you look at that rotation, it hasn't done jack. I mean, it's really rough. They're putting an awful lot of pressure on that offense, and especially that bullpen right now that they have to go out and make a move. So,
You know what I'm doing,
if
Jason?
I'm Baltimore, I try to
If
do
I'm
something pretty big.
Yeah, if I'm Baltimore, I'm calling up the South Side and I'm getting Lance Lynn and I'm getting Liam Hendricks. That would be my move because
Mhm.
you control them both through the end of 2023. You have the entire season of 2024 with them. And honestly, I think both of those guys are culture setting. Now, granted, the White Sox have not had the best culture over the last 2 seasons, and
Mhm.
I see that. But to me, it just seems like Lance Lynn and Liam Hendricks are guys that a young
Yeah.
organization, a young staff can rally around, and it's a
Yeah.
good way to spend money. And it's a stabilizing force too. Like Lance Lynn, you don't see Lance Lynn just get blown up in multiple
Right.
weeks. So I think
Right.
that would be a great fit for Baltimore.
Right. He did have a rough outing his last time out, but yeah, you don't see that a whole lot. And it looked like before that he was stabilizing a little bit, but you might be buying low on a guy like
Right.
Lance Lynn too. And this is where your coaching, your training, your development comes into play. If you see something, even with a 36-year-old Lance Lynn, where you can help him make an adjustment and get back to where he was, I mean, that's what you do. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. So when you look at that division, it's obviously the Rays running away with it at this point. Um, the Yankees and the Orioles kind of playing for second place, at least at this point. It's early and a lot can happen. We saw the Yankees get out to a huge early lead last year, and it got a little hairy there for a little bit because they really, really struggled. But Baltimore's 4 games back of the Rays. The Yankees are 6 games back of the Rays. And then we have the 30-27 Toronto Blue Jays and the 28-27 Red Sox. You mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's hard to buy the Red Sox, and it is. And I would imagine it's mostly pitching, although they have holes just about everywhere. But that Toronto Blue Jays club might be the key to this whole thing to me. The whole idea that the American League East is really, really good, and it's got 5 decent to really good teams in it, and no other division can say that. I mean, the American League West could say that except for the Oakland A's. The NL East can say that, except for the Washington Nationals. And you're getting the Cubs fall apart in the NL Central, or you'd have, 5 competitive teams there as well. But you get back to the East and the impact that could have. If you have the Rays and the Orioles and the Yankees, and then you have Toronto really turn it on. They're 3 games over 500. They're in it. They're 3 games behind one of the last wild card spot now. So they're right there. If they turn it on, the American League Central, you'd have to win the division to get in. The American League West, you might have to win the division to get in. I mean, at this point, the team that Toronto's 3 games back of is the Houston Astros. They're the owner of the final wildcard spot. So if Toronto gets going, the rest of the American League is in trouble. It's going to be dominated by the American League East that postseason. So if you're Toronto, though, how do you flip that? Because, man, I wish I could. I wish I could opine, Joe, on what's going on with Alek Manoah at this point. He is an absolute shell of himself, and I just don't know what's going on there. It is just really, really strange to see a guy be so good and look like maybe he's a 1. Looking like if they were to add another starter, he'd be the odd man out. That's how poorly he's pitched. But if you're Toronto, what are you trying to do here? How are you approaching the rest of this season? Do you go out and get some insurance for Manoah and Yusei Kikuchi, the back of your rotation right now, and hope that your offense just continues to kind of carry things?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the Blue Jays do if they can't turn this season around, because I look at this roster and you've got Dalton Varsho for 2 more years. You've got Vlad for 2 more years. You got Bichette for 3 more years. And I mean, Bichette and Vlad are going to cost $65 million a year combined.
That's a good point.
That's
a good point.
I don't know if this team is terrible at the end of this, or in July, if they're so far out of it. Do you parse some of these aging contracts away? Like, they just signed Jose Barrios to a big deal. I think if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, you kind of have to stay in it. Like, you have to hope for a win streak. And I would probably, if I was Toronto, I would probably try and shore it up in the bullpen. Get as many bullpen pieces as you can and see if you can lock down games later, because this team should hit. But boy, if Alek Manoah is this version of Alek Manoah and Yusei Kikuchi doesn't provide any value in the rotation like he is yet to provide, I don't know where you go from here, man.
That's a really good point about Guerrero and Bichette and what they're ultimately going to cost. And I'll throw another wrench into that. Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman's free agency.
He's got to be gone. There's no chance they keep him.
I wouldn't imagine so. We're talking about what? And obviously he's having a great year. He's having a career year. But we're talking about a guy who's already 30 years old, who's had some injury issues. Now, he has played 150-plus games 2 years in a row, so maybe you think that's behind him and that it was very short-lived. And he returned to form a little bit in 2022, adding a little bit to his performance from a down year in 21, even though he hit the 27 homers. But this year, it's been his best year: 288, 366, 490, a 138 WRC+, and we know what he is defensively, but free agency's coming. And if you're the Blue Jays and you're trying to stay in it, can you think about the Matt Chapman situation at all at this point? Or did you just wait until the end of the year to deal with third base to maybe think about offering Matt Chapman something? Or do you maybe try and get creative at the deadline and try to add to your weakness by using Matt Chapman? Like, is that something that you could see on the table at all? Is that something you might do if you were sitting there in the front office? You'd be selling high on Matt Chapman.
I mean, I think one thing that people don't talk about enough in this industry in terms of player control is that franchise tag. The ability to keep him in 2024 for, let's say, what would you say it would be? 26 mil for the
qualifying offer?
The qualifying offer.
Probably around 20 million. I think it was a little over 18 or 19 last year. I think I don't have the exact number.
Oh, right. I was mixing things up with the NFL, where it was the average of the top 5.
Yeah, around $20 million.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean,
but is Matt Chapman taking that?
That's a no-brainer.
Is Matt Chapman taking that? He's not taking that, right?
Of course not. But if you don't trade him, you get access to that draft pick, which isn't valueless, because we know Matt Chapman is going to get $100 million or more. Sure. He's going to be 30 years old, 31 years old. He's going to be arguably, aside from Ohtani, the best hitter on the market in a down year on the market. He's going to get a ton of money. So. Yep. You do kind of weigh that. I do think if they were to trade Chapman, it would for a rental, it would be a pretty good haul. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that shores up defense at third base. It's a middle of the lineup stick. Like Matt Chapman is exponentially more valuable than someone like a Cody Bellinger. So
Right. Right.
I I
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. That's an
I
interesting
think
situation they got there. And if they hang on to everybody and just try to add, do they just stick in the bullpen? Is that it, or
how
would you
much
try and
how
go out
much
on the
can they
market and
add?
grab a mid rotation starter?
Yeah, I
I
mean, how
think
much can
everybody.
you add? That
I,
payroll.
I think every team out there can afford to get a mid rotation starter. Can get a good 4 or a decent 3. And then what are they, middle of the pack in terms of the farm system when you look around the league, and half of
Yeah,
the teams that are ahead of them won't be in it anyway, like Colorado and teams like that. Like you're
I'm
really
just
only
more so
competing with the other
speaking
buyers.
I'm just more so speaking in terms of pure payroll. Like they have
Mhm.
inflated and bloated their payroll to levels that we've never really seen the Blue Jays approach. I mean, they're about 215 million right now. I just wonder how much that ownership. You look at what they did this past offseason. They moved Teoscar Hernandez, who they could have used. He's a good player. I know he's having a down year in Seattle, but he was one of the staples in their lineup. They move him for what was essentially a controllable, cheap Eric Swanson reliever who's making like a couple $1,000,000. That was
Mhm.
clearly a move to shed payroll. So my question is, are the Blue Jays in a position to add even $8 million in terms of a starting pitcher? I don't know. I can't answer that question, but I think based on their actions this past offseason, I don't think it should be assumed that they have the luxury of adding payroll in July. We'll see.
Yeah, I think when you look at because when you look at their luxury tax number, they're already over the first one. They're already into the
Yeah.
$250 million range, so they're already over the first one. Um, the first one is 233 this year, but then after that, it goes up, and they're not anywhere like they could add $8 million before they get to that second one. So maybe they go up close to it and add someone to help them in the rotation. But I just wonder, like, that's why I brought up Chapman, because like there's a money exchange there. If you can get a younger pitcher that's not making as much money, actually go backward in payroll and maybe open up room for something else to do with the deadline. I just look at this Toronto team and I see a club that I know what's Chapman making, like 12, 13 million a year. I think he signed a 2-year deal before last year worth 25 million. So if you can go out and trade Chapman for a $4 million starting pitcher and a $2 million infielder to take Chapman's place and a $2 million reliever, you actually take money off the payroll you're spending this season. But if you're just looking to next year, I mean, worry about next year, right? If you're the Blue Jays and you think we can do some serious damage, we just need to flip this a little bit. We're 30 and 27. We're going to get to the deadline. We're going to add an impact starter or a mid-rotation starter and an impact reliever. I just think you kind of go for it. What have you actually spent that $250 million for in the first place, right?
Right. I mean, this is called the San Diego Padres theorem. It's what it's what we talk about every week. What did we spend the money for?
Mm,
It's the New
yeah.
York Mets principle.
It's a really good
I mean,
question when it comes
listen.
to the San Diego Padres. I don't know why
If
they
the
went out and
Padres,
spent exactly that money.
well, because
I know
Peter
what the
Seidler said,
idea
let's do it.
is, but I don't know why
Yeah,
they did what they did. Yeah.
mega teams, at least in baseball, just don't seem to work. I will
Mhm,
say this, just as a kind of a fun talking point: if the Blue Jays were to move Matt Chapman,
mhm.
I would have to think, assuming they come back from what's been an early season slump, the Phillies would be all over that. I mean, they're left-handed heavy. They could use
Mhm.
a stabilizing force at third base. Alec Bohm has been good, not great. There's the designated hitter position that they can kind of bounce some different people in and out of.
They
That'd be a
lost
fun
Reese
deal.
Hoskins. Yeah, they lost Reese Hoskins.
Right.
So there's
I mean,
room there. Yeah.
all they've really got on from the right side is Castellanos. That's about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be a
That's a
good
good
fit.
idea. I like that. Let's go ahead and call those clubs and get them working on that. Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks. The
We good.
Boston Red Sox. Hanging on. They're hanging on. There's some talent there. Rafael Devers, Chris Sale is back, throwing the ball pretty well. Not great, but pretty well. A little up and down. The strikeout numbers are there. He's throwing strikes, getting hit just a little bit. I think the home run ball has bit him a little more than it normally does. But we don't like really anything else going on in that rotation, do we? And I think Boston is the one team that we're kind of looking at as, well, if there's going to be a seller in that division, this is it.
Yeah, I just don't think they have the roster to keep up for 8 months or however long it is, 7 months. I mean, look at the rotation. Like, how are they going to compete with the AL East for the rest of the year? They've got some good bats. Verdugo's having a good year. He's really back on it. Devers is having a good year. Some of the young Masahiro Tanaka has been great.
Yoshida, yeah.
Did I say
Masahiro
Masahiro Tanaka? Yeah,
you said Tanaka.
Yoshida.
Yeah. Tanaka might be having a great year, and if he's out there listening,
Yeah,
because I know
somewhere.
he is, I know he's a big fan. Hello, Tanaka. Yeah, we're big fans.
Yeah, but
yeah,
I did
you're
get
right.
the
That
Masahiro part.
that rotation is for lack of a
shoddy, and the bullpen is worse.
Whew, boy, it is. Boston ranks 25th in rotation wins above replacement, or excuse me, pitching wins above replacement, and the rotation isn't any better. It's 27th. So when you look at it, here's one of the things that worries me. We know the bullpen's not great. They've had some injuries there as well, but we worried about impacting that bullpen before the season started. You look at what's going on in that rotation right now. They've covered 278 innings the Red Sox rotation has, which is fifth fewest in Major League Baseball. The only team that has received fewer innings from their rotation that's any good at all is the Tampa Bay Rays. And we know the Tampa Bay Rays are what, Joe? They are a unicorn. You cannot look at them and go, well, the Rays do it, so we can do it too. Boston's going to have to get a lot more out of that rotation. So if you're looking, if your favorite team is a team looking to buy, look to buy from the Boston Red Sox.
Let me give you a little fact here. Chris Sale has pitched more innings in 2023 than he has since September 30th, 2019 until opening day this year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
He's pitched 48 innings in the last 3 years, and this year he's up to 55. You can't tell me with a objective lens that he's not going to get, we'll call it what you want, the dog days, soggy arm, like there's
or they might just have to pull back on him just by design, right?
A 34-year-old Chris Sale is not going to throw 160 good innings this year. Like they're gonna have to dial things back in the summer.
Yeah.
And he's the best starter they've gotten. He hasn't even been that good.
Boy, if you're a fan of I don't know, a team out there looking for pitching, Boston's not the team you're looking to really. And I guess unless you're going to try to trade for Chris Sale. They have a couple of young guys,
and they might be willing to get rid of him, but that's turning into a Patrick Corbin
that's going to be it's going to be a tough one. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. But if you want bats, Boston might be a place to go. They might have one or two that clubs out there looking for a decent bat to toss in the lineup at their D8 spot or a part-time outfield or something. You might be able to go get an Adam Duvall once he returns from the IL. There might be a useful player in Rob Refsnyder that Boston might be willing to part with. Having a really good year, mostly an on-base guy. 15% walk rate, throwing up a 400 OBP at this point. Raimel Tapia, a part-time player, might be interesting to some folks out there. Justin Turner, who's having an okay year, a little bit above average with the bat. If you're out there looking for a third base, first base guy to swing it a little bit from the right side. So the Red Sox might just be a place to go buy a 7-hole hitter if you're a team in the playoff race. But man, Joe, like if you're in the American League Central, you're in the American League West, you have to be thinking about like the player, not the players, but the front office has to be thinking about, we might have to win our division because the American League East might just put the Rays, the Orioles, the Yankees, and one of the two other clubs, Toronto or the Red Sox, all in the postseason. We don't think it's going to be Boston, but we think 3 are pretty much as close to sure things as you can have 2 months into the season. That's the way I'd be looking at it if I'm Houston, Texas, Seattle, the Angels, Cleveland. If I'm Detroit and I have any plans to make the playoffs, I'm thinking I have to win the American League Central. I have to win the American League West to get in. That's the way I would approach it if I'm those other clubs at this point, because the American League East, a little bit of a beast at this point, especially at the top.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think that 1 or 2 of these teams are going to fade back. I think the Red Sox are certainly going to be one of those teams. I don't know who else fades back though. Those rosters are good.
I'm expecting Baltimore to have some problems in the summer with that pitching staff a little bit, but maybe not enough to tear them out of a playoff spot. Like right now, they're 14 games over 500 right now. Like that's a pace of, that's a 95 plus win pace. Like I don't expect that to continue, but can they still get the 90 and win one of the wild cards? Yeah, I would think so. And like we talked about, they might add I mean, they're a club that has talent to
They
go
should.
add. The trade deadline is going to be fascinating. There's going to be teams looking to hang on to things. There are going to be teams looking to sell some things. I don't know that there are going to be a lot of stars out there on the market, Joe, but uh, I think we might see a couple of trades that and this is starting to happen a little bit more. I think we might see a couple of trades that really nobody saw coming, because I think
I
teams
think
are
you're
out
right.
there willing to sell at the right price for guys that have control years left. And I think this year there are going to be more teams out there willing to actually pay that price to avoid the rental a
I'm
little bit.
looking at
Let's go ahead and pay that price.
I'm looking at that's going to be with baseball changing, with the postseason format changing. I think the new market inefficiency is going to be essentially what the Rays have been doing for years, offloading players early and
Mhm.
replacing them with players that are ready to rock. Like
Right.
you look at the Brewers, and you just have to look at Corbin Burns, and you have to look at Willie Adames and say, or Rowdy Tellez, like you have to say, does the Brewers do they think they can replace them and still be reasonably competitive
Mhm.
and move them for a haul of prospects?
Yeah. I would
That's
say
where I
yes,
think this is
enough
going to
to
go.
explore it, right? We have to assume they're going to explore it. Yeah.
I would think
Interesting.
so. I
If
would think
if
so.
I'm if I'm in the National League right now, I'm scared to death the Dodgers are going to move and get the player I want, or the players I want, because they were pretty quiet over the winter. They didn't spend a bunch of money. They went out and got JD Martinez. They didn't spend a ton of money though. Like, if I find a guy out there I like, I want to go get him. And you know what, Joe? I want to go get him as soon as I can get him for a price that I can live with before the Dodgers get out there and start getting aggressive. That's the team I'd be afraid of, especially in the
Yeah.
National League, getting the player that I want. Everybody was talking about the Padres heading into the season, and the Dodgers are still the best team in that division. I mean, who saw it coming? Well, pretty much most of us, right? We kind of all saw the Dodgers still kind of hang. They know what they're doing over there. So cool. Yeah, the American League East, fun stuff there. All right, let's talk a little draft before we go. We
Let's
talk
do
a
it.
lot, Joe, about first round picks, because that's the thing most people are interested in. And relatively speaking, those are the ones that have the best chance to make some kind of an impact and to do it sooner than later. But when we think of, if we were to remove, say, the top 30 to 40 players from your board, which I have pulled up on my screen right now, by the way, if we take the top 30 or 40 out of it, and I know this list is going to be updated in the coming weeks, but if we go all the way down to, let's go down to number 40, which is Rafael Velasquez out of Huntington Beach. If we take everybody before that, Velasquez, Ledbetter, Cooper Pratt, all those, all the way up to Dylan Cruz, completely out of the equation. I'm interested in the upside plays, because when we have draft discussions, we always hear about, well, the floor on this guy, the ETA on this guy, the ceiling on this guy. Let's talk about that ceiling. Are there some guys in that early second round and beyond conversation that have big upside, but really don't have much of a chance to go in the first round, that we should kind of take a look at, that we should be thinking about? And this might just be a bunch of high school kids, because that's kind of the nature of it. But it seems to me there are some college bats in this group from 41 to 100 or so that might fit into this category. I'm just curious to get a couple of names. Who are the biggest upside plays after that top 40 for you?
I love this question. We never talk about this. For the sake of the discussion. I'm just going to eliminate the high schoolers that are throwing like 99, and that's kind of like their only trait,
Sure,
because I think
sure.
they're there for arm talent. So let's talk about some guys with like multiple tools, multiple ways of getting there. I am fascinated by Johnny Farmello, outfielder out of Westfield.
Mhm.
Chantilly, Virginia. He's a Virginia commit, 6'2", 200, super physical, left-handed hitter,
Big power, right? Yeah.
huge bat speed, but 70 runner too. So he's got that power speed combo, left-handed hitter. Folks that I've talked to don't like the approach. They're concerned over whether or not he's going to be able to work with pitch selection. So
Mhm.
the physical tools and the left-handed stick and things you can't teach, like those are the types of kids that I'd be all over. So
Mhm.
that's one. That's a big one right there, Johnny
Okay.
Farmello.
Johnny Farmello. Got it.
It's a good name too. It's like a Disney Channel movie.
Farmella. It is. And it's Jonny, right? So there's a little bit like he comes with a little style, a little more style. This is he already reminds me of Riley Green, and I haven't even seen him, Joe. Just like what
I want him to
you
hit homers, so we can just call it Johnny Rockets.
right. I like that. All right. So one of Jonny Farmella. Give me at least a couple of more. Who's the next guy on that list for you?
Okay, so another guy that I'm in love with is LSU righty Grant Taylor. Didn't pitch this year, pitched
Okay.
sparingly last year, pitched on the Cape, but the data and the operation and the athleticism, the strength that he added in the Cape. I mean, people talking about him being a late first round pick. It was so loud that I don't think his stock has really fallen off too much. So I think he's going to be a priority guy. I don't think he's going to end up back in Baton Rouge. So yeah, fastball up to 97, cutter, sinker, slider, changeup, curveball. He's got 6 pitches. And I just think that's the type of guy like, yeah, you had TJ this year, and yeah, he's probably not going to pitch for you this year. And yeah, he might not be ready until, May of 2024, but I think this is the type of guy that you just throw a $1.2 million bonus at and see what happens.
Is this a kid? I mean, he's obviously a college kid, but is this a kid who brings a bunch of physical projections still, despite the fact that he's a college guy, or is he pretty built? Because if I remember Grant Taylor that I saw, we're talking about 6'2", 225. Like, this isn't necessarily a guy you're looking to grow into his body. He's already there, right?
Yeah, he put on 15 pounds after the 2022 season. So he's kind of hit that physical peak right now at 220, 6'3". That's a full-grown man. And he's already up into the mid-90s. He's got, 4 or 5 pitches. I think at this point, what you're wanting to do is let's take a look at those 6 pitches. Let's choose 3 of them that we think are going to be dynamic weapons that really fit your movement patterns. I'm just getting into development slang now, but where can you find the most success? Let's get you healthy and find the most success. I think he showed enough in the Cape. I think he showed enough in spring ball in February to really just keep teams on him in the draft.
Mm-hmm. Does Hunter Owen, the lefty out of Vanderbilt, fit the mold here for you?
I don't know. I know that you really like him. I kind of want your point of view here. 6'6" lefties do not grow on trees. And I know he's been up to 97, but I'm always kind of skeptical on a guy that has durability issues like deep into the season. Grant Taylor's one thing. You cut him open, he's ready in 2024. Hunter Owen, I look at it as, man, you missed 3 weeks with fatigue. What does this look like when we ramp him back up? What do you think?
I think that's what creates the gray area on a kid like this, and why if he gets to, like, you draw on your board, you draw this line. If Owen gets past this point, we take him. But if he doesn't, we don't. Like, you literally draw a line on your board because of the medicals. But if you were to erase the medicals, like, this is a guy like you get him in your system, you teach him how to do the things that your organization is good at, and you get out of him what you think you can get out of him. But there are a lot of folks out there, you look at a guy like Hunter Owen and you're thinking, this is you don't see a lot of these guys in Major League Baseball, let alone college, that are big, strong, throw hard, have strikeout pitches, or at least projectable strikeout pitches. But, like you said, like, the medicals are one thing, and the missing the time and things like that. But he also hasn't really built up his endurance either. And we talk about durability, right? But he's not a guy that's like really used to going out there and has really built a track record of, I'm going to give you 6 innings, I'm going to give you 6. He hasn't really done that yet, has he?
No, and I keep thinking this is Patrick Corbin, which is a good thing. Patrick Corbin early in his career was really good.
He was good, yeah.
And Hunter Owen has a good slider, big fastball. Like, it looks, and it's that really like wide, big arm, kind of slot, like way up high that Patrick Corbin kind of made work with. I don't know. Every single player, I think, has a spot in the draft that makes sense. And I think the second round makes sense for a 6'6" lefty that throws 97 and can throw strikes. So
right. Yeah. He was,
but also he's been on, he's been in the first round for some public boards. So I don't know how hidden he is. He might go in the first round anyways.
Right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was scratched in his final start of the regular season. I believe that was just a couple of weeks ago. So
I think he was scratched in his last 3.
So it's recent. Like, the issue is recent too. It's not something that happened in March and he's over it. So you do have to look at that and consider that. Who else you got? You got at least one more for me?
Yeah, my favorite, maybe my favorite player in the draft. Brody Hopkins. He's a right-handed pitcher out of Winthrop. Yeah, I said Winthrop. 6'4", 200 pounds. Kid plays center field. He plays center field, and he's on the mound as a starting pitcher reliever hybrid up to 98 with massive arm side run and a 88 to 89 mile an hour slider. I've had Jake Arrieta comps. I've had Dustin May comps. And I got word this week that he ran a 6.360, which is essentially double plus speed, a 70 runner, throwing 98 on the mound and
Yeesh.
playing center field. Yeah. So, I mean, the kid is an absolute tool shed. I don't know where he fits, though, because, he played at Winthrop. Is he a flash in the pan? Didn't play on the Cape. This is one of those kids that it's like the pure talent here is obviously so incredibly loud, but the competition and the track record is so short. Where does he fit? So I think if any team were to get Hopkins in the third, man, what a pick that would be. Really fun.
So the one thing we talked about before we go here, before February, before draft season, so to speak, began, was it's a pretty good class, and it's one of the better classes in a lot of ways that we've seen in recent years. Whether you want to go back 5 years or 10 years, like whatever. As that's developed, and generally the class gets stronger as it goes. Now, early on, I was getting the opposite reports. I was getting folks at the National Checker and up that were telling me this isn't as good a class as we thought. That was early. That was like February, March. Now I'm getting the opposite from the same people. They're like, yeah, we're seeing it, just not from the people we expected to see it from. Is that the word you're getting as well? That this is still a pretty good class with talent, littered all over. Prep, JC, 4-year schools, bats, arms. There's a lot of shortstops in this class, a lot of athletes in this class, a lot of potential center fielders in this class, and there are just arms galore that get you 3-4 rounds deep where you're expecting to get big leaguers out of it. Are you hearing the same thing?
I think this draft ended up being a lot deeper on the high school bat side of things than a lot of people expected. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of people moving money around in the first round, especially in that 10 to 25 range, trying to position themselves to land some of this really interesting high school talent that's going to be there in the second and third round. I just think the high school crop as a whole ended up being a whole lot deeper than everyone thought. The pitching class, the college pitching class stinks. I mean, maybe that's just my opinion, but I think there's going to be some really interesting arms that are available in the third, fourth, fifth, sixth round range. I do not see very many first and second round college pitching types.
Right. The depth there isn't great. We know that there are guys at the top of it that have stuff, but yeah.
I mean, there's going to be guys taken in the third and fourth round with ERAs over 6, and I know that's going to happen. So it's just weird in that way. But college bats, it's going to be college bats galore in the first round, and I think you're just going to see a ton of really, really solid high school athletes picked all over, like kind of like 2020 and a little bit 2021. There was a ton of just high school flair. Mason Wynn, Jared Jones, like these guys that just move different than their peers.
I want to ask you about one guy before we go. I think you have him ranked somewhere around 100, give or take. But the reason I'm asking about Cade Kern is because
nice.
He plays at a Big Ten school. And this is one of my favorite conversations. I ask people these questions as much as I possibly can. About 20 years ago, Big Ten baseball was not really a thing. It just wasn't. And it was, I think about 2009, 2010, a guy like Alex Wimmers comes out of Ohio State. And I was like, wow, Ohio State, didn't expect that. And really nobody did. The Big Ten has improved so much when it comes to creating baseball programs and putting out pretty good, solid baseball. And Cade Kern is one of those guys that when you look at the performance, when you look at the numbers, when you read about him, and I read your write-up on him, and I wanted to just ask, I'm reading your write-up right now, 90th percentile exit velocities as a freshman in the Big Ten. full stop right there, right in the middle of your first sentence of your write-up on Cade Kern. But take it from there. Tell me about Cade Kern. You have him ranked at 108. What's kind of the high point for him? Or does he just kind of stay in that 100 range when it comes to getting pulled off the board in about 6 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, behind the curtain, he's 81 now, so he'll get a pretty big jump.
Mhm.
Kern has just been he's been kind of clawing his way back. Like everyone saw him as a second round pick entering the season, and through like the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, he was getting his base hits, but he was swinging through everything. Everyone started to doubt his his pure hit tool, even though there was some base hits falling. He finished the year so strong. Let's see. What did he finish at? Every year every week it seemed to be higher and higher. So 283, 402, 470, not quite as loud as I was expecting, but 16 stolen bases. He can play all over the outfield. He hits the ball harder than thunder. Really good in the Cape. I think Kern is going to be one of those guys that goes in the second or third round, kind of in the same mold as a Ryan Lasko from Rutgers. Just
Okay.
a physical outfielder, right, can play every position, can run, can hit. He's definitely in that mold of a sleeper. That's a good call.
Yeah, there's you have quite a few Big 10, Big 12 kids in the top 100 or so. Bryce Matthews at Nebraska, Max Anderson at Nebraska. You mentioned Lasko, Matt Shaw, obviously probable first round pick. There's some guys there. Really interesting. Cade Kern was just one of those guys that kind of stood out for me a little bit when I was reading about him and looking at some videos. So had to get that one out. So really quick before we go, a yes or no answer. Literally, just yes or no. At the end of the day, is Paul Skeens the number 2 pick? I'm going to ask you this again in about 5 weeks. But at the end of the day, does Skeens go number 2?
No.
Wow.
I don't think so.
I love it. To me, that is the key to the whole first round being fun. It's boring if they take Skeens. It is, man. It is just really boring. Like, let Skeens fall a couple spots and see who steals a guy who's probably in the big leagues in a year, pitching in a number 3 or
You
number 2.
ain't lying, man. He's probably pitching in a big league stadium in August of 2024. He's so nasty, but there's just been such a pull away from pitching in terms of the draft that I think it's enough to get a second hitter taking number 2.
Yeah, love it. Cool. This was fun. This is always fun. We're having fun. FSS Plus podcast. Joe, when is your update? Your top 500, or are you adding to it? Are you moving to 600 soon? Or are we doing another 500 here pretty quick?
I think we'll probably just move to 600, and that'll probably be June 8th. I think we'll move to that. Maybe it'll be June 15th. We'll see. I'm still collecting some different pieces of information.
So 10 days, 2 weeks or so, give or take.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
It'll be a big one too. There's going to be a huge shakeup in the top 30.
We're going to jump into some minor league stuff next week with the DSL and the complex league starting, and there's some rosters down in A-ball that are really, really interesting, and I want to talk about Ethan Salas too, the Padres kid who debuted in low A-ball at age 16. That does not happen very often, and I believe he got a hit in his first at bat. So we'll dive into some minor league baseball, talk prospects a little bit next week. Follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Doyle MILB. Did I do that right this time, Joe? Did I get it right the first time? This time, I think I finally did. I'm at Prospect Insider. Follow FSS Plus at FSS_plus. And of course, head to FutureStarsSeries.com for all the content, podcasts, lots of rankings, lots of event results, lots of fun stuff we're doing over there. In fact, I just put my rookie rankings out on Thursday. So check that out as well. We'll talk again next week. Joe, appreciate it. Thanks for your time. I'm going to do this ending over again because it sucks and I lost my train of thought because I got somebody flashing at me in the window. Hang on.
Hell no, dude. Just pub this.
Yeah. All right. Done. We'll talk next week.
So just chill till the next episode. Falling back on that ass, what a hellified gangster lean, getting funky on the mic like